This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com. My name is Todd DeWalt, and it's our job to help construction business owners and leaders systematize your business to create freedom, impact, and wealth. I've got a great interview for you today. I interviewed Garrett Moore. He is a former Navy SEAL. He's also the founder of Agorus, a company that is tackling the housing shortage, the labor shortage, and they're using software and robotics to build houses in days instead of months. Here's what you're going to hear about in this interview. I had a lot of fun with this one. I asked the question, all right, Garrett, if a team of Navy SEALs had a mission to build 500 houses, how would they do it? What would look different about the way Navy SEALs would go about it versus the way the typical construction industry goes about it? A lot of great lessons in that question right there. We also talk about some of the misconceptions about being a Navy SEAL, the biggest killer of teamwork, how amateurs train until they get it right, and how pros train, which is very different. Garrett talks about how the Pareto Principle, the 80-20 principle, applies to skilled trades training. We talk about the commander's intent, very powerful leadership principle, and how you can use it. The North Star principle, risk avoidance versus ownership, and which one creates a low trust environment. We talk about decentralized command. We talk about who goes first with trust. Garrett explains why mantras are effective and a few good ones that you may want to remember, and how lukewarm hurts culture, how being lukewarm hurts culture. Lots of great stuff in this one. I love this conversation. Before we get into that, here are a couple of incredibly valuable resources that I want to share with you. If you own a construction business, I want you to imagine this. Imagine that your team is solving problems quickly, with fewer mistakes, and without you. In other words, they're taking ownership. Your phone is ringing a lot less with questions, you're getting a lot fewer emails, and fewer problems are landing in your lap. You have time to think, time to operate strategically and be proactive. You have time and the mental bandwidth to work on the business instead of being stuck working in it. Your projects run more smoothly, they start on time, there are fewer fires to put out, and you finish them on schedule. You know what you want your business to look like 2 years in the future, and you have a plan to get there. If that sounds good to you, I would invite you to check out my free online training workshop titled Get Out of Your Business, How to Make It Run Without You This Year. You can watch it free by going to constructionleadingedge.com/get out. Here's what you'll get out of this webinar. You'll learn your first few crucial steps if you want to spend more time working on your business instead of being stuck working in it. You'll learn 3 things you should absolutely do before you make your next hire. You'll learn a proven process to design your construction business for the future, how to motivate your team to take more ownership and solve problems without you, and a lot more. You can watch the free online training workshop at constructionleadingedge.com/get out. That's constructionleadingedge.com/GETOUT. And if you want to work with my team to systematize your construction business, go to that link, watch the video, and click the button to schedule your strategy call with my team. Are you tired of chasing down field reports? Raken's easy-to-use software helps you connect the field to the office. That way, you get the progress updates you need without wasting hours on the job. With Raken's mobile app, field crews can share updates as they build. Everything from daily reports, time-stamped photos and notes, to time cards, checklists, and production data. All that field data is turned into a professional, branded PDF report, making it easy to see and share how a project is going. With Raken's web dashboard, the office can track projects in real time and find actionable insights to improve them. Give your field crews an app they'll actually use and get the data you need to build better projects. To learn more, go to rakenapp.com. That's RAKENAPP.com. Okay, now let's get into it. My conversation with Garrett Moore, former Navy SEAL and founder of Agorus. I think you're going to love this one. Right, Garrett Moore, welcome to the podcast. Where are you hailing from today?
San Diego, California.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. So home of lot of Navy SEALs, which you are one of, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But before we get into some of your background, tell us a little bit about your company. What's the name of your company, and what are you guys doing?
Right on. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Agorus, and we're trying to build a technology and a business model solution that pulls construction into the 21st century. And so we end up having a unique software and hardware manufacturing process that essentially allows us to build any structure, any residential structure, better, faster, cheaper, offsite in a factory.
Gotcha. We'll get into that some more in a few minutes, but I'm really intrigued by your background as a Navy SEAL. So I saw in your bio a statement that as an ex-Navy SEAL, well, first of all, is there such a thing as an ex-Navy SEAL? Or are you guys like Navy SEALs until you're dead? How does that work?
So I have a slightly controversial view on this, in that I absolutely loved what I did. But to me, I think when people set it up as their identity, I am a Navy SEAL, and that's who I am. I think it sets them up for failure. Being a Navy SEAL is one of the most rewarding jobs I've ever had. But it's only one part of who I am. I'm a husband, and I'm a father, and I'm a business owner, et cetera. So it's a tremendously formative part of my background, but it's not everything.
Gotcha. And there's some pretty famous Navy SEALs out there: Jocko Willink, David Goggins, a few others. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you run into when somebody finds out you were a SEAL? Like, what are some misconceptions that people often have?
There's a bunch, but I think a couple of the ones that come to mind is a physical description, that therefore every SEAL is 6'4", 260 pounds, no body fat, and just a Greek god. And I would say, I think that illusion came to a screeching halt when you're going through training and you're watching those types of physical images fall away. And it's the 5'6", 170-pound wrestler that grew up ranching in the middle of nowhere that is just eviscerating everybody else. So there's the mythos of what a Navy SEAL looks like, and then the reality that, by and large, pretty normal looking guys, tremendously exceptional and capable, but oftentimes not in a way that you can necessarily see from the outside.
Gotcha. And what led you to become a Navy SEAL?
So I grew up playing sports. I love sports. Basically anything that had a ball was fair game. Of those, got a chance to keep playing football in college. So I played football at Stanford, quickly realized imposter syndrome, didn't belong, not as capable as everybody else. And the bar gets raised and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm in a different league. However, if you can't play team sports and you can't keep going on to the next level, well, what do you do? And so I was looking around at the time, really trying to unpack life of one of my best friends that ended up committing suicide. And he had been very interested in the military. And so it just kind of got me on a reflective path. And then the more and more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, the military is kind of like team sports. You get to have a very common mission. Self comes last, that camaraderie, et cetera. So as I started to unpack the military, started looking at, well, if you're going to do the military, I want to do special operations. And if you're going to do special operations, you start to look at other branches. And honestly, it's a stupid reason. I fell in love with the SEALs initially because it was training is in San Diego, and a decent chunk of the force is in San Diego. And I also loved the water. Once I got to meet SEALs and really understand the chemistry and the camaraderie and the brotherhood, I was hooked and never wanted to do anything else.
So your bio says that as an ex-Navy SEAL, you took the lessons you learned in active duty to build a great company and revolutionize the way America is being built. So first of all, can you talk about what your active duty looked like, where you were stationed? What does active duty as a Navy SEAL look like?
Generally speaking, it looks like a lot of time training. Your basic training, your advanced training, you deploy and you come back for training for a whole lot more. And I think that's actually one of the things, I'm jumping ahead a little bit to the lessons, but one of the things that most people also don't realize about Navy SEALs is that you spend the vast majority of your career training rather than doing. And so I think that's one of the mantras that gets beaten into you early on, is that professionals train until they get it right. Amateurs train until they get it right. Professionals train until they can't get it wrong. And so the idea is in the heat of combat, with the stress of having jumped out of plane, missed your drop zone, or the cold, or the enemy shooting at you, if you have so meticulously trained yourself and your body and your mind, you're going to react on autopilot when bullets start flying. And so when I look at a typical SEAL's career, and mine, I would say was no exception, a lot of that's in training. So I did 3 deployments, 2 in the Middle East, 1 in the Pacific. I spent 2 years stationed in Israel, and really just got a pretty broad snapshot. I would say a lot of people have significant time in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's a decent chunk of where we've been. But most people don't realize that SEALs are actually deploying to lots of different parts of the world, South America and Europe and the Pacific, really continuing to kind of train and deploy forces all over.
What were some of those lessons that you picked up during active duty that translate to building a great company?
One of the things that translated into a mantra that we've kept at the team is the idea that team, teammate, self. No one is too big to pick up a broom. Egos and lack of humility, to me, are the number one killers of teamwork. When you start to say, hey, look at me, or step up above everybody else and say, I'm better or I'm more important, it absolutely guts the performance of a team. And I think that gets pounded into you from a very early stage. As an example, when you're going through buds, you do not get to go anywhere, go to the bathroom, whatever it is, you go somewhere with a swim buddy that's within 6 feet. So when you get punished, they come with you. When they get punished, you go with them. And so from a very early stage, that teamwork gets pounded into you until you can't imagine not having it. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that my co-founder and I, who's also a SEAL, have brought with us into the construction space, is that the idea of teamwork. And not, let me back up. I am absolutely in love with the construction industry. I'm not in love with its ways. So if I come across as critical of where we are, it's because I want to take us better. And so one of the things specifically is, I don't know that many people would put teamwork and construction in the same sphere. I think their interaction of construction is 30, 40 different trades, kind of all on their own sheet of music, trying to build this structure together. And so one of the core heartbeats to our business is the idea that teamwork and vertical integration are critical to tackling the fragmentation that exists in construction.
Interesting. So talk about that fragmentation. What do you mean by fragmentation?
So kind of at a macro level, when you look at the people that have studied construction, so and as an example, the Economist or McKinsey have done an exhaustive batch of articles on construction productivity, et cetera. But when you start to peel the onion on what is driving that, a large component of it is the fact that there's very little communication throughout the process. So let me give you an example. In a typical, and I'll talk residential for a sec, commercial construction is ahead of residential in this space. I live in residential, so I see that fragmentation more. You have a builder that says, hey, architect, go design a home. Architect designs a home, usually not thinking through a whole lot of the structural implications, the mechanicals, et cetera. They start in a digital file. They send a PDF of that file to a structural engineer that re-engineers the home digitally, and then resubmit that to a city as a PDF. And then you've got a contractor that's walking around with a set of PDF prints. Oftentimes, 9 times out of 10, there's discrepancies between the structural engineer and the architect, and then it gets into a finger pointing game. When you keep going down all the successive trades, what if the framer's like, yeah, I'm gonna frame a house, and all of a sudden he shows up and there's a stub up from the plumber that's right in the middle of the king stud. He's like, well, shoot, I need that. And so then it's whose responsibility is that? And so it kind of gets into, and again, I'm stereotyping with a very broad brush. It gets into a finger pointing or a blame game, because nobody's really cohesively owning it. A general contractor is really just kind of communicating and organizing the initial subs, but not orchestrating and weaving them together. So I would say the analogy I use is a camel is a horse designed by committee. In general, that's how we build most structures. 35 different subs, all kind of working towards the same general vision. But it's like, can you imagine buying a car and saying, hey, my tire guy doesn't want to talk to my rim guy, or my rim guy wasn't coordinating with my axles, and the axles weren't properly designed because the engine guy wasn't thinking that. And all of a sudden you're just like, okay, this car would never run. I understand philosophically why construction has evolved to the business model and structure that it is, because we have to weather the storms. It's cyclical by nature. We're averse to putting money in R&D and capital because we just want to survive the next bump. So there's no blame. It's just, unfortunately, this is where we are. And we've been here kind of in the same model for the last 75 or 100 years. And so the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results.
Yeah. I've spent 25 years managing projects, mostly in the commercial space. And if you think about it, it's a great definition of contracting is assigning risk. So contracting is about assigning risk. So it's, let's get it built, but let's make sure that we assign the risk appropriately. And that is not the best method. So here's an interesting thought exercise. Let's say a team of Navy SEALs received a mission to go build 500 houses somewhere.
Okay. And
you started with, in America, let's say.
Okay.
And you started with a clean sheet of paper. How would a group of Navy SEALs go about building 500 houses? What would they do differently than the traditional home building process?
Great question. I've never had anybody ask that of me. But I got a very, it's funny you bring that up because it was actually a core business idea. We've backtracked from it a little bit initially, but first thing you would do is I would take my platoon or my troop and I would pick whatever I needed, 10 different people, 30 different people. And I would say, I'm going to go pay for you to get a crash course. And I need you to become a world-class X, framer, electrician, plumber, or whatever. I don't care if you don't sleep. I need you to become world-class at that in 90 days. Making this up, maybe 120, but like not 4 years. I would say, you do not have the luxury of that time. I need you to go get expertise. So I would go across the board and I would say, everybody gets one core competency and one core skill. Your job is not only to know it, but it's to teach it. And so then I would expect every single one of the 30 people in my troop to also know at a decent level how to do everybody else's job. One of the things that I believe is requisite and inherent to high performance teams is everybody has the ability to step up and lead when needed. And everybody has the ability at some level to do each other's jobs. Everybody knows what their core responsibility is, but when things go sideways and to use a combat analogy, when somebody goes down, people have to step up and own that. So in this context, bringing in the SEAL corollary, in a SEAL platoon, you have one or two expert snipers, one or two expert JTACs, breachers, divers, you go down the line. But at the same time, every SEAL is a pretty decent diver, pretty decent jumper, pretty decent shooter. But when you need that core expertise, you have the person at arm's length that's your buddy that says, hey, what's the best round for this kind of shot? So that, I believe, would be the very first thing I would set up for construction is ownership. Instead of looking at this as assigning risk, saying, we're going to own this as a team. Forget about the risk for a sec. Or I, as the leader, I'm going to own all of that risk so that you guys can focus on owning and executing. And then you start to bring this team mindset of going, I am jack of all trades, but master of one. This is my thing, and I'm going to own it, and I'm going to teach it across the board. Sorry, that was kind of a long diatribe, but that would be the very first thing I would do. And that's super contrary to construction. And I don't mean any discredit to people that have spent their entire lives focusing on one skill. That's just how I would approach trying to tackle this, because then here's the key innovation. When you run into a concrete allocation, because it's happening right now, when you run into a lack of timber or a lack of copper, whatever it is, your team can flex and adapt to that curveball, because that's not the only thing they can do. And they adapt as a team because it's not, oh, that's your fault or my fault. It's what do we need to keep the team going?
And you have this redundancy built in. You have resilience built into your team. And you also, you don't have all these silos so that people can swing when, if concrete or framing is behind, you have these generalists that you can shift resources to that and shift back to MEP when necessary. Yeah.
And I think part of this is based off of a principle that I did not know of prior to the teams, but now I'm fully bought in on. It's called the Pareto Principle, or most people call it the 80-20 principle. And it's the idea that if you looked at All of the skill that, let's pick a trade, an electrician, all of the skill that an electrician is going to get in 100% of the time, you could probably get to 80% of that skill in 20% of the time. That last tail end is very tough to get to. But if you think about that from a multidisciplined team approach, if I then have 10 hours in the day and I can spend 2 doing 5 different things, I can get to decent expertise in a broad range of different skills. And so I believe construction has been focused on creating specialists. And while there is some of that skill needed, I believe we've lost the art of generalism, which says, you know what, you probably can do a lot of different things pretty well if you have the person that's an expert on speed dial.
Yeah. So the electrician, let's say it's pretty easy to, in the residential world, it's pretty easy to drill holes and pull Romex and nail on boxes. It takes a little skill to make up a box. It takes a lot of skill to wire a panel and maybe get the meter base set, or certainly on the commercial side to install a switch gear and do complicated stuff. But and maybe it gets a little more complicated teaching someone to bend a pipe, but not a lot of people run conduit anymore. It's mostly MC cable. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What else would you do differently? Let's talk about the design process. Let's go back to the mission. You need to build 500 homes somewhere in America with your Navy SEALs. What would you do differently with the design process?
There's a saying I've kind of started to say, and the numbers are not accurate, but the concept is what I'm going for. You can either plan for a couple of days and build in 6 months, or plan for 6 months and build in a couple of days. Mission planning is the exact same thing. And I would treat the design process like mission planning. I would go, all right, all my key stakeholders are getting into the same room. So whoever's going to own the budget, whoever's going to own the design, whoever's going to own the structural engineering. And I would go so far as even residential. I know this is more common for you in commercial, but almost nobody does MEP design at a digital level in the residential space. And so I would say, all of you are getting in the same room, and we're not leaving until you're all on the same page about the optimal way to do it. And yes, I know you might want a structural stud there, but it's going to, you have to work that out with all the other stakeholders. And then when we all leave the room, it's okay to disagree in this room, but we're going to commit as soon as we slap the table and say this plan is executed, and now we're going to go. And if something drastically comes up at the job site, then we can revisit the plan. But we're not going to keep opening and closing this box every day. We opened it to design it. Now it's closed, set it aside, go focus on execution. So by putting all of the designers and really emphasizing how critical their work is, it makes it that much more easy and scalable for the team to go out and execute that plan, because they've thought through all the issues up front and they've done a ton of contingency planning. What if we run into a concrete allocation? What if there's weather issues? What if our lead electrician gets it? They treat it so much more with so much more discipline in the design that the guys that are building would have a much easier time, I believe.
Yeah. And I think in today's supply chain chaos, shortages, things being discontinued, difficulty getting things, I think now's the time to let the supply chain and purchasing inform the design process. So instead of saying, you know what, we're going to use the same wood floor truss, we're going to use the same LVL as we always have and just fight through the chaos. What if you found a material that's available, and then you let the supply chain inform your design process? And here's what I see a lot. There are, whether it's residential or commercial, a lot of contractors just have these blinders on. And when an architect or an engineer prepares a set of plans and they've designed something that doesn't make sense, or it's very difficult, or it's more expensive, or it's a long lead time, they just pound their fist and say, those damn architects, those stupid engineers, and they don't do anything about it. And what I think contractors really have the obligation to get involved early on and say, look, these bar joists are 24 weeks or they're taking 8 months to get. So can we design around some wide flange sections if it's a steel construction, or, hey, we need to look at an alternate method, but they just accept things. And really what the client needs is if you want to really impress your client, then stop pounding your fist on the table, complaining about the designers, and get involved on the front end and operate as a team. Here's a question. You have your team building houses. How would you delegate authority to the people on the ground to solve problems? If there's a conflict or there's some issue, how would a team of SEALs deal with issues that came up in the field that's different than the typical construction way?
So 2 thoughts come to mind. The first is, if I'm building this team, the architect and structural engineer would be a part of that team. And I would expect them to be out at the job site periodically to understand the pain points. In fact, I might even ask or demand they put on a tool belt and actually build some of the houses themselves so that they are fully brought into the loop. And I might even take some of the trades that were out at the job site and put them in the shop while they're drafting and understanding, because it's easy to point blame. Neither side necessarily understands the other. So full team, everybody's tracking. Second thing is, I would require my architects and structural engineers to give as much commander's intent, as much latitude to the job site and go, here's the deal, guys. I don't care if it's a 14-inch TJI. I don't care if it's a 14-inch dimensional piece of lumber. I'm going to give you as much latitude to solve this problem. Yes, I need it to calc and the math has got to be there. Got it. But that structural engineer goes, there's a lot of different ways we can build this house. I will leave it up to your judgment and to your team to make sure that the material and the way it's built is going to pass code, but also gives you supply chain latitude, design latitude, et cetera. So it would give them a lot more autonomy down at the ground level to make those decisions. When it comes to the conflict resolution, when we're all on the same team, our North Star is the vision statement that we essentially set for that team, which is, in this case, maybe it's build them faster, maybe it's build them cheaper, maybe it's customer success and customer service, whatever the metric that we're defining is, that becomes the North Star. And then everybody's aligned towards that. Now, at the end of the day, there is somebody that has to make that decision, but I would push the tie-breaking authority down to the field and going, hey, supervisor or project manager, this is on you to solve those problems. And if you do not have the requisite resources or guidance, then you come up a layer or two to the, call it the master plan community development team or whatever it is, an extra layer above in terms of leadership.
You mentioned a term, commander's intent. Talk about that. What is the commander's intent?
I'll be the first to say I am not a Prussian historian, so there's a lot of much smarter folks at war colleges out there that can kind of give full-blown case studies on commander's intent. But in general, the idea behind commander's intent is really baked into Western military doctrine, which is the idea that if a commander gives his intent and lets people on the ground, the men and women of the service, make decisions within a latitude, they're going to have the best information and they're going to be able to react the quickest. And so as an example, probably a lot of people have seen Band of Brothers. Without commander's intent, if I am completely shot up and I land behind enemy lines and I don't have any of my buddies around and I have to, aggregate groups back together, I'm going to completely fall apart because I'm waiting on higher headquarters to tell me what to do. But if I know generally my North Star, where I'm going, then it allows the elements below to read and react to a dynamic and changing environment. I think never before has the environment been so dynamic or so changing with supply chain issues and labor issues and COVID issues. Pick a drama and there's something out there. And so in basic kind of SEAL task planning, and this is not unique to the SEALs, this is military doctrine, you have commander's intent, which is, hey, I want you to build this 500 unit community in 500 days. I'm making this up. That is my desire. That is my commander's intent. Then you start getting into the key tasks. Okay, key tasks are, I'm making this up. I want 25 different teams. I want a budget that looks like this. I want a customer success score that looks like this, like some mainstream stuff, and then a desired end state. Hey, at the end of the day, I want this community to be a great template so that we can go out and repeat this in later on communities, or that we are pushing the ball forward for the industry. And then what's hard as a commander is giving them the latitude and the resources to go run, even though they may not solve the problem the same way that you would.
Mm. So much there. And I like to use the example of D-Day as a good example of decentralized command or commander's intent. Is there a situation that you were in as a Navy SEAL where the commander's intent was important? Anything you can share related to that?
Yeah, I mean, a good example was late 2011, running a SEAL platoon up in northern Iraq. This was at the end of President Obama's administration, the end of negotiations with Iraq about whether or not America's going to keep forces or pull them back. Commander's intent comes out, hey, we are pulling out of Iraq. And this was like within a couple of months. And so then that was basically all the commander's intent I got, which was pull out, keep or destroy any secure or sensitive equipment, and bring everybody home alive. And you've got, at that time I was up at Mosul Airfield. So we had a lot of infrastructure, a lot of stuff going on. And it was a process of figuring out what really matters. Yeah. I mean, you're going to put sledgehammers through stuff that was very, very expensive, but like it crystallizes down and you go, I have a finite amount of time. I know what my commander's intent is. The rest I have to kind of make it up as we go. And it was good because I don't believe there's any way even the general flag officer level, even the senior leadership would have had any concept to try and tell me, hey, Garrett, all of this comms equipment needs to go here. These trucks need to get loaded onto these aircraft, these personnel. Like it would never have worked because they would, even if they had tried to micromanage, they would not have had the ground level information. And obviously, everybody came back safe and sound, didn't lose any gear, et cetera. And so it's a happy ending. But it was a very, very complex and dynamic environment. And I was the only person in the world at that time that would have had all the information at my disposal to solve it, because I'm on the ground, not because I'm special. It's just I was closest to the problem.
Yeah, there's a misconception that I've seen over and over and over in the corporate world or in the construction world. There's this misconception that he or she who is higher on the org chart is better equipped to make decisions. And the reality is he or she who is closest to the problem sees the whole context, sees the whole picture, hears everything, can actually see what's going on. They are better equipped to make decisions like that. Is that what you're saying?
It is. They're better equipped when they have intent. If not given guidance or a North Star or direction, then they don't know. Do you want me to hunker down and solidify our forces so that as we transitioned over to Iraq, they're not taking stuff? Like there still has to be some broad vision and guidance and direction. But if I, as a commander, say, go to Mars, there's a lot of different ways that you can potentially get there. Slingshot around the moon. Maybe you've got, I don't know, space sails. You've got, right. But one of the things that we say around the company is I'm tremendously stubborn on vision, but very flexible on details. So if you arrive at the desired end state that I'm telling you to, how you got there is not as important to me. And so I think that's kind of the dichotomy between commander's intent and the decision-making on the ground. If I'm very clear as a commander on what I want you to achieve and you get there, okay, then we're in alignment.
Yeah, it seems like it's in the dynamic that you are operating in, there was no other option. If in order to get things done right, you had to use decentralized command. You had to trust your people on the ground. And I think there's a myth that that just won't work in construction. People think, I can't do that. I can't give up control. I can't depend on my people. So I need to I think there's a couple of problems. One, there is no vision. There is no North Star. There's no answer to the question, where are we going? Why are we doing this? They're just doing it. And the other mistake is just giving people tasks. Go do this. Yeah. Without any context of why or any guardrails of where are the lines on the field, so to speak. I like to say, you need to tell your people, what does winning look like? That's the question that the people are asking. What does winning look like for the team? What does winning look like for me? What does it look like this week, this month? Am I winning?
Yep.
And and I think I believe that that's one of the keys to solving the productivity problem in construction. This is a kind of an unpopular take, but I don't think we have a skilled labor shortage. Yes, do we need more people? Yes. But I think we have a productivity crisis. And I think if you really dig into it, we have a leadership crisis. We have an absolute deficiency in leadership. And that's why so many people are leaving the industry. That's why they won't come into the industry. That's why they're just dragging around on job sites, because of a lack of leadership.
I completely agree. And it kind of gets into this risk avoidance versus ownership. And they're kind of two opposite sides of the spectrum. If your entire industry is based around mitigating risk, around assigning risk, then there's no trust, because if I'm down at the ground level and I know that my bosses, my leaders are going to just look for a way to assign risk and blame, then there's no trust. But if we all of a sudden had construction leaders that say, I'm going to own this job, whether it goes really well or really poorly, that's on me. And then all of the subcontractors, all the project managers and the superintendents know, holy smokes, the boss has got my back. Now I have the latitude to go push the envelope and make it better. I think the other thing too is there has to be trust up. There also has to be trust down. And I think this is another reason I think construction leaders have a little bit of a tough time is in the reverse context. Do you think your sub is going to throw you under the bus at the first chance they get? Do you trust them to work hard and be professional and clean up the job site for customers and all those other things? But if both of us are antagonistic towards one another, the leadership and the ground deck level, then trust is what allows decentralized command to happen. If you do not have trust, commander's intent, decentralized chain of command, all that stuff becomes almost impossible to pull off well.
So who goes first? If you're in a low trust environment, somebody
leadership
has
always
to
goes first. It's on the leader to initiate 100%. And that's hard, putting yourself out there and cultivating that trust. And yeah, you want to be smart. You want to, pick the right subs and you want to pick the right partners, et cetera. But it's 100% on the leader to take the first step in reconciliation.
Yeah. Some people would say that leadership in the military is pretty easy. You just give an order and they have to follow it. What would you say to that?
I think there's merit to that. But I think one of the challenges to leading in the military is you're executing a playbook, but in a dynamic environment, surprisingly, it's very difficult to change and adjust that playbook. And so motivating, yes, you can always motivate by force. Hey, I have a Uniform Court of Military Justice. You ultimately hold the legal trump card. However, that said, I think it still doesn't change the fact that creating good teams is about cultivating trust and buy-in and ownership on both sides. And so I don't think it's any different. In the civilian world, that carrot or that lever is money. In the military, it just happens to be the rule of law. So I don't believe that actually leading in the military is really that much different than leading as a civilian.
So how effective are sticks and carrots? Are they the best motivator, or is there a better way to motivate people?
I think you always need carrots and sticks, but I fundamentally believe that the third one is the most powerful, and that's alignment of purpose and vision. Are we building houses just to put food on the table for wife and kids? Not that that's a bad reason, but that's kind of a slightly shallower motivation. Are we building houses just so I don't lose my job or so I don't do whatever? Okay, shallower motivation. But if I am part of a team and I'm part of a purpose that is bigger than myself, I fundamentally believe that is a far more rewarding and powerful motivator than just throwing money or throwing punishment at our partners in our teams.
Absolutely. So, and we'll get to getting some tips on how to get people to follow your vision in a moment. But you shared one of your mantras. I want to talk about mantras for a few minutes. Yeah. You mentioned the mantra team, teammate, self. But why Well, first of all, what is a mantra, and why do you find them to be helpful?
I am the worst culprit of this, so I say this somewhat tongue in cheek, but we live in a world where there's so much ridiculous white noise. My phone is on almost all the time. It's next to me. It's my alarm clock. I'm terrible about turning off notifications. I get pinged all the time. You look at the news, you look at the world. We live in 2022. We live in a world with a tremendous amount of white noise and distractions. I believe mantras are the signal that can punch through a tightly packaged message that punches through that chaos and that noise. And so that's why it's so critical. Your voice is one of a million other voices that are whispering in somebody's ear on any given day. And it's not that they might even know that that's there, but it's causing a level of background noise that makes it very difficult for your intent to be heard. So mantras are signals that punch through the noise. And I think that's absolutely critical to get to alignment on vision.
What are some of your go-to mantras that people on your team hear all the time?
There's a bunch. I'll just kind of give you a handful of them. So we like to say strong views loosely held. In other words, I can have a very strong opinion about a topic, but I can hold it at arm's length and hold it loosely so that if somebody has better information or counters that in an objective way, my worth, my ego is not tied to that view. It's like, nope, throw away that opinion. That was a bad plan. Let's go with yours. I like it. A lot of these you'll find centered around some semblance of humility, because I think humility is the number one thing that we screen for in people, hire, fire, and promote based off of this, because if you do not have it, almost everything else becomes worthless. Another one is humans are more important than hardware. I stole that. It's a soft truth, special operations forces truth. And it's the idea that at the end of the day, people are everything. So your purpose and your people should always trump your product and your profit. Because if not, you're literally just in the business of making money, and that will never endure. That's a Jim Collins-ism, but I think it's fundamentally important. And then if you've built a culture and a purpose that values people, I think that is a very intoxicating hook that's far more motivating than the carrots and sticks we were talking about earlier. Yeah. Another one we use, again, kind of come back to this teamwork, is abandon self, embrace the team, or no one is too big to pick up a broom. And it's the idea that best idea wins, period. Doesn't matter if it comes from the janitor, it comes from Garrett. The entity, the organization, the purpose is the highest allegiance, not who's got what on their business card. I would say another one, again, kind of going back to people, miscommunication is the devil's playground. So much of any business centers around people, and construction is no different. And miscommunication invites finger pointing, it invites blaming. It's so caustic. I mean, think about it. I saw a wedding ring on your hand. I don't know what your marriage is like. I don't know what other people's marriages are like. But in my marriage, 9 times out of 10, the root cause of any disagreement is usually miscommunication, misaligned expectations. Hey, you did this and I thought you meant this. Oh no, I was just tired and I was thinking of it. It's little, but the problem is it's insidious. And once that seed of doubt or frustration is planted, unless it's uprooted and communicated out, it's just going to grow. I think the same thing applies in business and construction as well. I could keep going down the list.
Talk about 2 is 1, 1 is none.
So that's another one, shamelessly. And none of these ideas are mine. I've stolen these or borrowed them from much smarter people than me along the line. 2 is 1, 1 is none is the same thing. It's a SEAL motto that's baked into you from the get-go, which is the idea that you always have to have backups, because your primary weapon, your primary plan, your primary personnel, they're going to fail. And I think in construction, it's especially true. We're starting to talk a little bit about supply chain earlier, but the idea is the enemy gets a vote. Now, the enemy could be market conditions. It could be your customer. It could be your competitors. There's a whole bunch of factors in life that you don't control, which I'm loosely branding the enemy, that which is beyond your control. The enemy gets a vote. And so if you do not have redundancy, you do not have backups, your strategy is based off of hope. Hope is not a great strategy. I've got one course of action, one plan. I'm going to send it and hope it works. That almost always does not work out. So it gets into, you have a rifle and a pistol, you have a secondary arm, you have two sets of warm socks and you go out on a patrol. You have two sets, like you just keep that. And by baking that into your way of thinking, you're always kind of playing the game of what if. And I think it makes you as a leader more resilient to change when it happens, because you're already like, yeah, I thought about that. What happens if the labor market falls out? What happens if mortgage rates go up? What happens if X, Y, or Z? And then it does not become such a sucker punch because you've already thought about it, at least at some level.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, Spencer Paget, was a Marine, and he used a term called, you want to be a hard target, make yourself a hard target. And doing those things, following the 2 is 1, 1 is none, having a backup plan, asking what if, it makes you a hard target for failure. And I really like that. I'm going to steal several of these, actually. So those of you listening, you're going to hear the enemy gets a vote. You're really going to hear miscommunication is the devil's playground quite a bit. Let's talk about vision.
I'll add one last one because it's one of my favorites. And I think in construction, it's especially challenging, but it's very convicting. And it's Steve Jobs gets a lot of the attribute. I don't even know if he was the one that said it. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. When in doubt, when you're building out a plan, a hiring plan, a development plan, a whatever, by and large, the simplest solution is usually the best one. And so that is, I think, indicative of combat, but it's also indicative of just going about how we scale our businesses. It takes a lot of difficulty to make the complex simple. And I do not pretend that construction is complex, but if you can distill that complexity down to simplicity, that is sophistication.
Yeah, I'm reminded of something called Occam's razor, which I think says there are a variety of solutions. The simplest one is typically the best. Yeah.
Yes.
That's good.
Sorry, I interrupted you. I had to throw that in because it's one that we've been beating the drum on for a lot lately.
No, I love it. I love it. What are some of the keys to getting people to follow that North Star, to follow the vision? You're in your world as a Navy SEAL, you're literally asking people to put their lives at stake to carry out a mission. And what have you found to be some of the keys to getting people to follow your vision?
I think there's a couple of things. One is setting your North Star. Where are we trying to go? And then at a layer deeper, kind of setting the purpose. Why are we doing this? Why is defending America overseas from people who want to rape and pillage and burn people alive? Why is that worthy of your time, your family sacrifice, potentially your life? And if we set a higher elemental purpose to it, that is step one. Step two is being very transparent and consistent about what is that vision and what is that purpose, recognizing that it's not for everybody. And there's nothing wrong with not wanting to go to the Middle East for months or years on end to defend your country. Nothing wrong with that. So part of it is saying what it is, and then letting people know that when you're building the team, and giving them a graceful exit if they're like, this is not for me. Because if it's not for you, then there is a higher purpose and a higher calling for your life that gets you out of bed and gets you excited. If you are not pursuing that, you are not doing yourself a service and you're not doing our company a service. So it's setting it, but then also kind of pruning and saying, for people that are really attracted to that, nothing you can do is going to convince them to pursue anything else. At the same time, for people that are not attracted to that, it's a good kind of discouragement so that they never even get on the bus in the first place. And if you're transparent about how hard it's going to be and the hours that they're going to work, but they're bought in, they're going to push through when it gets tough because it's not a superficial motivator.
So you're saying that it's important to, what I'm hearing you say is it's important to polarize somewhat. You want to have a vision that's strong enough to attract the right people, but also repel the wrong people?
I do. And that sounds a little hard, but at the end of the day, being lukewarm, I think, is one of the most damaging things to a culture. You do not want people that are tepid about your culture, and you definitely don't want cultural anchors. And a large part of it is just, it's pruning. When people are aligned, keep them and double down on them and invest them and pay them what is needed to keep them motivated. But at the same time, when people are not, I don't care how talented they are, cut them loose. Because if your purpose and your vision is truly your core heartbeats, then it trumps everything else, including, and I know this is sensitive, including profitability. including productivity, including prestige of their resume, it has to be the highest purpose and highest calling that drives everything else.
So what is your company's vision? What's the vision at Agorus?
Our vision is to be the largest residential home builder in the country by the end of the decade. And so to be fair, by that, I have to add a little bit of a caveat, which is, D.R. Horton or Lennar is probably doing 75, 80,000 units a year. So that's kind of the benchmark. Okay, we want to be doing 75 or 80,000 units. We as a company are not fully vertically integrated. We are building a platform and a technology to empower developers, not to replace them. In other words, our product is really right now focused on slab to sheetrock. I'm not looking at sales. I'm not looking at pools or landscaping or cabinets, countertops, floors. We are trying to get 2/3 of most building projects in the residential space, both in cost and time, are spent in the rough envelope. And so this is where we are passionate, is about accelerating that envelope and getting to the point where it becomes almost a commodity. And then your developers and your builders can focus on all the stuff that customers care about. 9 times out of 10, customers don't care about the studs being straight. They don't care about the wire on the wall, the insulation. They just want to look and interact with the stuff that they're going to experience on a daily basis.
So what is your why? Why did you decide to tackle this problem?
What gets Kyle and I, my co-founder, out of bed every morning is looking at this industry and all the different ways it affects our economy and our planet and pushing it forward. So as an example, most people don't realize this, but the heating and cooling of buildings contributes to 40% of global carbon emissions. It's actually not the trucks on the road and all the other more common sources of carbon. So we need to tackle this in a holistic way. And the heating of cooling of building all happens in that shell. Another example of kind of a deeper cause is the fact that we're continuing to see housing prices go up. And we fundamentally believe it's a delta between supply and demand. The demand is continuing to stay, and I think it's changing as millennials come of home buying age, as COVID changes the way in which we live. And there's not an influx of new labor behind it. But to your point, I don't believe we have a construction labor challenge. I believe we're not empowering our labor force with 21st century tools that allows them to do their jobs better and faster and cheaper. All the advances that we've seen in technology have not baked into the construction industry. So I guess at the end of the day, my core why is I am passionate about bringing technology into construction to make housing something that anybody can have anywhere in the world.
There's a blog post on your website about how Congress will give a $100 million investment for construction technology and or for new housing. What's that all about? When
governments see a problem, and I'll say government, I'm not saying politicians, but the two go hand in hand. When governments see a national problem that's not getting better, and they don't see the private markets necessarily fixing it, they want to step in. Unfortunately, when they do, they step in with a very large lever, millions and millions of dollars. I think the problem that we're starting to see get a lot more politicization and a lot of publicity is housing costs. And so I think we're going to start to see this become top of priority lists for cities, states, and the national government saying, okay, what we're doing is not working. Our citizens are complaining. They're literally getting priced out of homes. Home ownership is becoming less and less attainable with mortgage rates, et cetera. We need to fix this. And I think even though well-intentioned, I think it's a little bit naive. I think the broad 30,000 foot view is technology alone will fix this problem. Well, I think technology is very important. I think it's the marriage of technology with the know-how and industry knowledge that already exists to open this wide open. Because what I would see is if we took our labor force, how difficult would it be for us to double that labor force in the next year or two? Very, very difficult. How difficult would it be for us to innovate on a technology side, software, hardware, robotics, automated manufacturing, and then all of a sudden take this labor force and double its output? And so I think that's why Congress sees that as a great lever. Instead of dumping more and more money into trade schools and local tax incentives, et cetera, we're going to get more bang for buck as a nation by doubling down and investing in tools and technology that will empower people to build better, faster, cheaper.
I'm reminded of a documentary I saw. This was back in the maybe post-World War II era. I don't remember the exact terminology, but the federal government invested tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars at the time to create this giant sheet metal press. And it was this press that had thousands of tons of pressure. And it was used to stamp out parts for automobiles, airplanes. And it was a brilliant move by the government because they invested their investment in this enormous press that no single business could ever design and create, was a lead domino for the airplane industry, for the automotive industry. And it set off this chain reaction. So it sounds like their intent is to do something like that, to invest this investment to be a catalyst or a lead domino that helps solve a larger problem. Does that sound about right?
I absolutely agree. And I think, construction's had one of the best years probably in recent memory for most of your customers. And even then, do any of them have enough cash on the balance sheet to put $100 million into R&D for some new, no, it's really tough because there's a chicken or the egg conundrum. I got to hold that dry powder so I can survive if Federal Reserve, pump interest rates to 9%. So I can't double down and separate with that to go into the R&D world. The federal government, or I would also argue the venture world, is also well equipped to play long game bets that have strategic effect for the country because they can not see rewards or returns for another 10 years. And I think I don't want to give too much credit to the federal government because I think much of it's due to Musk himself, but a large part of what helped Tesla get off the ground were federal subsidies because you're in that infant chicken or the egg stage where the product is not working as well. It's not profitable yet, but if you can get that lever, get over the hump, now we look at electric vehicles as a foregone conclusion, but it wasn't a foregone conclusion 10 years ago.
Very true. Very true. So great stuff. Let's talk about your business. Who do you work with? You mentioned your intent is not to be a home builder and compete with the D.R. Hortons of the world, but if there are people listening thinking, wow, I wonder if these guys could work with me because I have supply chain issues. I have labor shortages. My framing, I'm going to build 300 unit multifamily project in the next couple of years. I wonder if they can help me. Who are some of the people that you work with that should reach out to you if they're interested?
At a high level, anybody that wants to accelerate their cycle time and drive consistency is in our sweet spot. One of the things that's also unique about us is our technology and our construction manufacturing process doesn't really care what geography it is or what kind of product. So we've done everything from ADU to multi-story, multifamily. Doesn't really matter. Where I will say we run out is when you start getting into steel and vertical construction. So 5 stories above, we're not in the skyscraper game. But when you talk apartments, multifamily, single family, ADUs, the backyard granny flats here in California, everything is fair game. We are looking for partners that have a development business, not necessarily kind of, hey, I want to do a one-off custom home up in wherever, but people that are developers, don't really care necessarily what type of product they're developing, that want to push and have a construction technology bent and want to push their process forward. I didn't mention this earlier, but in a single family example, our goal is to get to the point where single family builders are 30 days permits to keys through our platform and our technology. Now, we're not there yet, but that is where we want to get to the point where you're at rough inspection in a couple of days, and then it's off to the races on trades. Now, in the multifamily space, there's a lot more complexity that goes into it. But at the same time, we want to take a 10x reduction to any trade that we take on board. So right now, if a framer's taking 20 days, we're at about 2 days. And that is where we really believe that we can unlock. And we're looking for partners. We're not really looking for customers. We're looking for people that are like, yes, Garrett, I know you're young and you're early in the development of your company and you've only built a couple hundred houses, but I want to be a part of this. And I want to be one of your early adopters because I will provide great feedback that will help make you better, which will make me better, which will make our industry better. And it will spin this flywheel.
Yeah. So one of, I think everyone's favorite question is, what's in it for me? So what's in it if I'm a multifamily developer or I'm building hundreds of homes a year? What's in it for me to partner with Agorus?
At the end of the day, it's money, time, and being at the forefront of driving innovation in the industry. So in that order, so money, when you start to shave time off your build and you start to shave waste off your build and you start to shave miscommunication, it adds a tremendous amount to the bottom line. Most people don't realize it because they're not even used to thinking about it, but all of that adds up tremendously. So we are cost competitive on our actual product, not to mention the real value is all the money that we unlock from all those extra facets of waste and cost, et cetera. Second aspect is time. When a builder and a developer can reduce their cycle time, they can recycle that capital and build more, which has a tremendous effect to their overall macro profitability. And then the last one is we've found a remarkable number of people that truly do want to innovate in the space, but feel impotent to do so because they don't have the outlet, they don't have the partner, they don't have the voice that can say to different entities, I have an idea on how we can do it better. We are that voice because we're an open book. This is one of the benefits of having non-builders as founders is that I know that I don't know, but I'm always searching and looking and pulling the thread going, hey, partner, hey, customer, hey, investor, how can we do this better? That's what I'm married to. I'm not married to my way. I'm married to what solves problems and makes it better. So I think all three of those things can be appealing. If somebody's looking for I don't want to rock the boat, I just want to keep doing what I've been doing because it's safe and it's what I know, we're probably not a good fit because we are going to kind of rock the boat and we're going to ask the provocative questions. And again, that's no harm, no foul, just being transparent about who we are and what makes us tick.
And one other thing that I would say, based on what I've heard from industry organizations like the Associated Builders and Contractors over the past few years, that institutional investors, large developers, those companies that are buying hundreds of millions of dollars of construction services a year are saying we have to get better. We have to be more efficient, and we also have to be more sustainable and better for the environment. And what I can foresee happening is at some point, owners, developers saying, if you want to work with us, you have to embrace this new technology. It's sort of like 25 or 30 years ago when safety was kind of optional. Large buyers of construction services said, you know what, we're not going to work with unsafe companies anymore. So to even get an opportunity to bid on our projects, have a seat at the table, you have to demonstrate your commitment to safety. And I can see the same thing happening when it comes to companies having to or needing to demonstrate their commitment to the environment and to productivity and efficiency as well.
Yeah.
So if people want to learn more about Agorus, follow you on social media, get in touch, where are some of the best places they can do that?
Easiest place is LinkedIn and our website. Feel free to reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn personally. And website, we're constantly updating with new blog articles and news and podcasts, et cetera. And I would love to get connected with anybody that's passionate about pushing the ball forward in construction and learn from their experience and unpack it together.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put some links to your website and to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes for this episode for those who are interested. Garrett, great stuff, man. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for the work you're doing and for taking some time to talk with me today.
Likewise, Todd. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I have one challenge and one request for you before you go. Here's the challenge. What is your 5-minute action item from this podcast? In other words, what is one thing you want to implement in your business or on your projects that will take you 5 minutes or less? My challenge for you is to create an action item as soon as this podcast is over and do it. Send yourself a text, send yourself an email, put it in your planner, write it down in your unicorn journal, whatever it is, but take action on something from this podcast episode so you get some real value from it. Now, here's the request. If this podcast has been valuable to you, please leave a rating and a review. Here's how to leave a review on Apple Podcasts on your iOS device. Number 1, open up the Apple Podcast app. Number 2, go to the icons at the bottom of the screen and choose search. Search for this show, Construction Leading Edge. Be sure to click on the show, not the episode. Then scroll all the way down to ratings and reviews, and finally click on write a review. These instructions will also be in the show notes. If you could leave a rating and a review, that would mean a lot to me, and it also helps get the word out there to other folks. And don't forget, if you want to get out of your business and make it run without you this year, go watch my free online training workshop at constructionleadingedge.com/get out. That's constructionleadingedge.com/GETOUT. Thanks so much for listening. My name is Todd DeWalt. I'll see you next time. Remember, every project starts in the field, and Raken's field-friendly software makes documentation easy. With Raken's mobile app, crews can document progress on the go, and you can track everything in real time right from the office. So, give your field crews an app they'll actually use and stay on top of all your projects. To learn more, go to rakenapp.com. That's RAKENAPP.com.